Warm greetings to you. I'm Pearl John from Logos Management, and I'm delighted that you could join me this week as we continue the journey of looking at the life of Nehemiah. Last week we referenced the theme leadership that makes a difference as we studied part 8 of Nehemiah's life. And we spoke of 3 key learnings. 1, lead with humility and be servant-like. 2, maintain accountability. And 3, celebrate success and give God the glory. Today, we move on to studying Nehemiah chapter 6 verses 1 to 14 and focus on the theme overcoming adversity. Overcoming adversity. This passage tells us about the opposition that Nehemiah faced as he worked to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. In the face of intense opposition and threats to his life, Nehemiah remained steadfast and focused on his mission. Today I'd like us to highlight 3 key passages and draw significant meaning and lessons as to how we could find effective ways to persevere in the face of adversity. 1, recognize the tactics of the enemy. Recognize the tactics of the enemy. Nehemiah chapter 6 verses 1 to 4, we see that Nehemiah's enemies, Sanballat, Tobiah and Geshem, tried to distract him from his work by inviting him to a meeting in the plain of Ono. Nehemiah recognized that this was a tactic and a ploy to get him away from the city, where he would be vulnerable to attack. He responded by sending a message to his enemies saying, "I'm doing a great work and cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you?" Nehemiah's response shows the importance of recognizing the tactics of the enemy and staying focused on our mission. In our own lives, we face many distractions and temptations that can pull us away from God's calling, mission, and purpose. The enemy might try to discourage us by doubts and fears and tempting us with worldly pleasures and ambitions. But if we are able to recognize these tactics and stay focused on God's will for our lives, we can overcome these obstacles and remain faithful to our calling. An example of this kind of perseverance is from the life of William Wilberforce, a British politician who worked to end the slave trade in the early 19th century. Despite facing intense opposition and ridicule, Wilberforce remained committed to his cause, speaking out against slavery in Parliament and working to mobilize public opinion against it. His persistence paid off, and in 1807, the British Parliament passed the Slave Trade Act, which outlawed the transportation of slaves in British ships. 2, trust in God's protection. Trust in God's protection. Nehemiah chapter 6 verses 5 to 9, we see that Nehemiah's enemies tried to intimidate him by spreading false rumors about him and threatening to harm him. They even hired a prophet to try to convince Nehemiah to hide in the temple for his own safety. But Nehemiah was smart. He saw through their deception and refused to be afraid. He trusted in God's protection. And he said, "Should a man like me run away? And what man like me could go into the temple and live? I will not go. I will not go." Nehemiah's trust in God's protection provides us with a sterling example for us to follow in our own lives. We may face threats and dangers as we seek to serve God, but we can trust Him and His faithfulness and protection. We can take comfort in the words of Psalm chapter 121 verses 7 and 8, which says, "The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. This kind of trust in God's protection is evident in the story of Corrie ten Boom, a Dutch Christian who helped hide Jews during the Holocaust. Corrie and her family were eventually caught by the Nazis and were sent to a concentration camp where many of her family members died. But Corrie remained faithful to God and trusted in His protection, even in the face of death. She later wrote this book called The Hiding Place, which tells the story of her family's courage and faith in the midst of unimaginable suffering. Third, trust in God's plan and provision. Nehemiah's example teaches us the importance of trusting in God's plan and provision even when we face opposition and obstacles. In verse 10, we see Nehemiah refused to flee in the face of danger, but instead trusted in God's plan and provision. He knew that God had called him to this work, and he trusted that God would see him through to the end. My dad moved into full-time mission work when I was a kid of 11 years. With 3 children to support, the move was scorned by most in the family and elsewhere. The question that was raised was, how would he manage to feed and take care of 3 growing up kids with a meager allowance, a significant reduction from the family income? But my dad was very clear that he trusted God and not any man. And thus, he was confident that the Lord will take care of us. And sure enough, we were taken care of. The Lord never leaves those who place their trust in Him. The learning is that He cares and He stays with you through the thick and thin and shall see you through. So just trust Him implicitly. This is Pearl John signing off, The Other 167. Thank you for watching The Other 167. Let me urge you to share this with your friends and neighbors and encourage them to watch and be blessed. Have a wonderful day and a great weekend. See you next week. God bless.